Hi, and welcome to Steve Wraith's interviews. And I'm joined by a very special guest today, somebody who is well known, I think, in the military ranks, and it's Peter McAleese. How are you, mate?
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, great to have you on. And I just want to say, and I say this to a lot of the ex-servicemen who we've had on the show, thank you very much for putting your life on the line for people like ourselves, because the work that you've done over your life, it doesn't get enough praise, I don't think, from the people who just sit at home and live their 9 to 5s. I think what you've done is outstanding, and that's why I wanted you to come on the podcast. So thanks very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about where you were brought up, first of all. Where were you born and where were you brought up, Peter?
I was born in Glasgow and I was brought up in the Ridley area, just right on the outskirts of Glasgow. It was right next to Berlin Prison.
Was it a tough upbringing for you, or were you comfortable, Peter?
You don't realise it was hard until later on, when you compare with other people. Poverty, toughness is if you live in among it, it's just normal, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, it's you were born as well, obviously 1942, and obviously the country was at war back in those days. But living next to Barlinnie Prison, I've interviewed a few people who've been in there over the years. But I mean, what was that like? I mean, I remember watching on one documentary, you spoke about your father who served a little bit of time in there and used to wave from the window. Is that right?
Well, what used to happen, you got yourself into a cell that was opposite where we lived, and he'd send signals to my mother with various colours in the window. So, my mother would go and say, real Scots accent, Peter, go and see how your daddy is today, And I'd go and say, it's green or red or blue or something. And that seemed to make her day,
Yeah, amazing stories. When you were younger, were you a fit lad? Were you a sportsman, Peter?
I got interested in football, but I walked everywhere I went, and I was always running about. I was naturally fit then. I played football for the junior school, and it was just everywhere we went, we walked, so we were fairly fit.
And were you much of a scholar? Were somebody who studied hard at school?
I enjoyed school. I had the advantage of having good teachers. Um, the the furthest back in the class I was number 3. I was normally number 2, but there was one guy there every year he used to pip me. And but the standard in the Scottish schools at that time was fairly high. The school I went to was actually run by nuns.
Ah, well, interesting. What did you leave school with, qualifications wise?
I just left school with the normal qualifications you have in Glasgow, with school leaver certificate. I wasn't, when I went to the secondary school, I lost interest in education, although I was always high up in the class. It wasn't a priority with me. It became a priority when I went into the army, when an education corps guy took an interest in me, and he wanted to know why I was doing that class, because my IQ test had said I didn't need to do it. And I said I'd like to stay, and I caught up with my education there, and I finished up with GCE level type of thing,
Yeah.
Wrong, GCEs. Yeah.
What did the young Peter want to do? What were your hope and aspirations? Did you have a job in mind?
No, I just wanted to be a soldier ever since I was a kid.
Why? Why was that? Was it? Did you watch movies? Did you read comics? Was it something like that?
Well, when I was young, there was national service. Every boy at 18 went into the army. So and then they stopped national service, and I said, I still want to go. And I can remember the first time I saw parachuting. Some guys were jumping out of a balloon, and I said to myself, I want to do that. And is it okay to swear?
Of course it is, yeah.
Yeah. I seen this paratrooper walking through Glasgow, and he was immaculate. You know, he had good bearing on him. His boots were immaculate. And I was mesmerised by this guy. And I just followed him for about maybe a mile and a half. And then he turned around and he says, what the fuck are you doing following me for? You know, I was just, he looked the epitome of everything I wanted to be, you know.
Fantastic. So obviously you leave school, and you know, you look at your options, I guess. The parachutes obviously made a big impression on you. So how did you first go about enlisting?
Well, I ran away from home when I was 16, and I spent a year up in Aberdeen working on the docks. And one of the dockers was an ex-RSM, and he made one hell of an impression on me. I mean, we were working with coal, unloading coal ships, and he came in every day and his boots were immaculate, you know. They were always highly polished. And I spoke to him about the army, and he said, son, it will do you good. So I enlisted in the British Army in Market Street in Aberdeen. And I enlisted on the Monday, and I was in Aldershot by the Friday. There was no heavy duty psychological tests and all that. They just roped you in, and I was on the train Thursday evening, arrived there Friday morning.
Did you cope okay with the discipline, Peter? Because you know, I can speak from experience. I went off the rails a little bit as a youngster when I was in me very early 20s. And it came to a set two with my father, something which I was never proud of, but you know, we're good friends these days. But I enlisted into the TAs, which of course were always frowned upon by, you know, by regular army guys. But I felt that I needed to discipline myself, and I went into the TA and I stuck it out for a year. It wasn't for me. I've got to be honest. The military life wasn't for me, and yeah. I felt almost victimized, I guess, by the sergeant major that we had, especially drill, something which I found boring and, you know, didn't want to do. My mind was elsewhere. I got out of it what I wanted to get out of it. I did basic training, etc. But the discipline was something I struggled with. Did you struggle with the discipline?
No, I didn't. You know, you either accepted it or you were on your way. There was no messing. If you didn't conform, you were gone. They put it down to what was called wrong attitude. They'd offered to transfer you to another regiment, or you could go out the army. But I chose to see it through. I found the instructors that I had in the parachute regiment were extremely experienced. They were very, very firm, but they were also fair as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the training side of things. I mean, I've loaded a video onto my channel over the last couple of weeks, something which I managed to record off TV many years ago called P Company, which is from the 1980s, which shows you the training that they had to go through to become, you know, to become part of the parachute regiment. Did you find the training physically easy?
By the time we got to P Company, we were already fit. You know, we'd spent 10 weeks training, and you know, you're running about everywhere. You know, and P Company was, to most of us, was just a formality of the test. It was hard, but don't forget, we've been training for it for 10 weeks.
Was there anything you found difficult, Peter? Did you find anything difficult? I mean, you know, physically you didn't struggle. Did you struggle with maybe handling weapons or map reading? Was there anything you struggled with?
No, the standard of instruction was fairly good there.
Yeah.
Weapon handling, you know, it was just pumped into you all the time. No cut gun, mag off, fresh mag on, carry on firing, you know, that type of thing. It was just pumped into you all day long. I think I may have struggled a wee bit with map reading, but you know, I'd never actually done it before. So, but I picked up as I went along, you know.
What did your parents think about your chosen career?
They were extremely happy. The great thing about the army at that time was I signed on for 9 years. So you've got 9 years employment. You know, you're not hanging about labour exchanges looking for a job.
So obviously, you know, you do your basic training, you pass out, you're now part of the parachute regiment. What was the next step for you, Peter?
Well, when I was in the depot, I seen a chap and his face looked like leather and he was old compared with me. Can you see? I mean, I'm only 17.
Yeah.
This guy must be in his late 30s. And he had this beige beret on. I says, who are those guys? Because he was a trooper. He didn't have any rank. So anybody who was as old as him in the parachute regiment, they were sergeants, sergeant majors. And a chap said to me, that's the SAS. I started making inquiries into it. And I decided I'm going to have a go at this. And I did 18 months in the parachute regiment. And then I transferred to the SAS. Well, I never transferred. I applied to join it.
What was the difference between the parachute regiment and the SAS?
The parachute regiment was very manic. Don't forget, they're turning young men from civilians into soldiers. So everything was done on the double, just to get you used to acting instinctively. Whereas the SAS, it was a more casual approach. You know, you went there, I was never shouted at or bawled at there. They just said, go there or do this or do that. If you never done it, you were gone.
Your time in the SAS was short-lived at that period. You were returned, weren't you, back for disciplinary reasons, returned to unit. So you ended up back with the paratroopers. What was the disciplinary reason?
When I was young, I was a bit punchy and I couldn't hold alcohol. And I tended to get into more than my share of fights. And I think the regiment at that time, the policy was no fighting. And I was RTU'd quite rightly too, because that was the policy of that time.
So you're back with a parachute regiment. I believe this is where you got your first postings. Where did you end up?
The first one I had was in Bahrain. I went over to there. I was there for 6 months. I went halfway through the tour. I came back from there and I went to Cyprus. And then we did about 5 months in Cyprus with the United Nations. I came back from Cyprus and we started doing exercises in Germany, various places in Scotland, you know, doing battalion exercises, platoon exercises. Yes.
Were you burning the candle at both ends though, Peter? You like to have a night out, and I've heard some stories from other people in the past about, you know, being stayed, especially in Cyprus. Were you living the dream when you weren't working?
Yeah, I mean, beer was cheap there at the time, but eventually I seemed to come to more terms with it. I was finding out more about myself, that you just cannot go about fighting with people. Now, where I came from in Glasgow, that was normal. You know, if we go back to Glasgow again, if two men had a dispute and it finished up with a fight, at the end of that fight, it was settled. Can you see? There was no animosity. There was no getting each other back. That was it. It was settled. And I just carried this on into the army with me. And it held back my career because I was never a bad soldier. I was a badly behaved soldier. I do admit to that.
You obviously, you know, you were deployed to those places. You spent a bit of time in there, but 1969, you resigned from the British Army. Why?
I was instructing at the School of Infantry. I was married. My marriage was going through a bad spell. I finished my contract. I joined in March 1960. I came out March 69. And I said, I'll try and make this marriage work. And I said, we'll see how it goes. And it didn't happen.
So obviously you come out, you're in civvies. What was the next step for you, Peter?
Yeah, I started chasing money, real working on oil rigs, working in pipelines. But it was never the same. Although you were getting money, all it did was you spent more time in the pub. And that's how I felt at that time.
Did your marriage survive?
No. I don't blame the woman. It was, it was me that asked her to marry me. So there's only myself to blame on that. You can turn around and say, "Oh, she did this, she did that." The fact is, I wasn't a good husband. I tried as a father. That was the best I could do.
Yeah. Is that a regret for you, do you think, Peter?
Yes and no. Yes, it's a regret in that you look back and you say to yourself, I could have wasted those years. And no, because if I hadn't gone through all the things I went through, I couldn't be where I am today. And it's the contentment I have is phenomenal. I've never drank a glass of beer for the best part of 9 years. And I'm extremely happy. But it was a process I came through, and it was growing all the time, spiritually, mentally, morally. And I'm happy where I am just now. And I've still got good relationships with my family.
That's good. You lived within spitting distance of Barlinnie Prison as a youngster. You ended up in prison in the 1970s. I guess that was just the downward spiral of coming out of the army.
What happened, I had a fight before I went to Rhodesia.
Yeah.
Right. I spent 3 years in Rhodesia, in the Rhodesian army, and I came home for a leave. And I'm, sort of promenading through Hereford, and I got arrested. And I said, I haven't done anything wrong. They says, yes, you did 3 years ago. The long arm of the law.
You can't escape it.
It was something like a sick joke. I was taken up to Glasgow in the train. 2 guys huckled me onto the train. I then went to court, and the courts can be funny. You've got a guy there, and he's sitting with these sort of glasses on the end of the nose.
Yeah.
And they said an assault 3 years ago. And he says, "What record? Does this man have a what record?" He says, "Yes, he's a sergeant in the Rhodesian Army." Rhodesian Army? He says, "Yes." "What is he doing here?" "He's home on leave." And he's due to go back. "When is he due to go back?" He says, 26th of August. He went, "Remanded in custody till the 26th of August. So I got locked up in Berlin. And the funny thing was, I got there and everybody, guys I knew at school, guys I knew from various places, they were all locked up there, It was a good catch up, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's that's a hell of a story. The Rhodesian situation, what was that? How did you end up going out there?
I was on my way to join the Foreign Legion. Mm-hmm. And I got to London and I met a mate of mine. He was a reporter called Murray Davis. He a reporter for the Mirror. And I chatted away to him and he said, "Peter, leave the Legion alone just now. They're not doing a great deal." He said, "Try Rhodesia." So I went out to Rhodesia and I joined the Rhodesian SAS. and it was I had to do 5 months. I mean, I was a staff sergeant when I left the British Army, and I was taken into the Regiment SAS as a recruit, and I had to do 5 months basic training again.
Oh,
All the things I'd gone through in 1960, but I enjoyed it. Again, the instruction was good. There was keenness, enthusiasm, and the other thing is, these men knew at the end of training that they were going to be involved in a war. So everything was taken very seriously there.
was the money good for fighting? That kind of.
I don't know where people get this from. Any army I've ever been in, they're pretty stingy when it comes to cash. They're not guilty of overpaying people.
And I mean, it's not the first time you did. I mean, you were involved in the Angolan Civil War as well, weren't you? For the was it the National Liberation Front of Angola?
Yeah, and I met a guy, John Banks, and he says, "Do you want to go to Angola?" And I said, "Yeah." So I went out there, and it was funny. In the army, we talk about accelerating promotion. That's where you go up the ranks fast. But I seem to have surpassed everything that the army ever done. I got on the plane at Heathrow, and by the time we flew to Ndili in Zaire, I was promoted from troopie to captain. And then when Callan got arrested, when Callan got captured, I was then a colonel, inside a period of about 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And I did an interview with the television, and this guy kept calling me colonel, and I was really embarrassed by it all. And he, colonel this and colonel that. He says, "Please excuse me. I've never been commissioned in my life. I'm just the guy in charge." I just felt embarrassed, that people could actually believe that they held those ranks as well. It was an experience for me. I saw men at their best, and I saw men at their worst.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that we have to remember. I mean, it's a job to you, but it's there's some pretty horrific things, you see when you're fighting on the front line, no matter whether it's, for the SAS, the paratroop regiment, or, as a mercenary in a different country. It's something which we have to remember. And I mean, mentally, were you affected by this? We hear a lot now about PTSD and, the after effects of maybe being in conflict. Have you ever suffered, from that kind of situation, that kind of illness?
If I ever had PTSD, it was probably, I just know that I enjoyed being in war, and I enjoyed the build up to operations and stuff. It's something I've never experienced. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but when I came out of the British Army, I suffered a little bit of stress, and it wasn't nothing to do with what I'd been through in the British Army. It was to do with, I was out in Civilian Street. I didn't know how to go and look for a job. I didn't realise that you had to tax, insure, and all these different things with cars, and everything all seemed to be, you were running to different places to do different things. And I found a wee bit of stress there. That was all. But to turn around and say PTSD, if I've had it, I've never noticed it.
I think what I've picked up from watching you on documentaries over the years, Peter, and from reading, your books, and I mean, you've got, there's 3 books out there. You've got Beyond No Mean Soldier, you have No Mean Soldier, and you have Fighting Manual, which,
Yes.
are all available on Amazon, and I'll stick the links in the description box below so people can buy them. But I think what I've always picked up is that you were never afraid to take a job on and take it, and go to some different countries. And I mean, we've obviously mentioned Angola, we've mentioned Rhodesia. You ended up in South Africa, and obviously that was in the late 70s. I think you joined the British South African Police Special Branch. What was that like?
No, the South African Police Special Branch was in the latter years of Rhodesia.
Yeah, okay. What was that like?
I really enjoyed it. There was we were doing various jobs for them. One job we went, they had a thing called exchange au pair. It was with the South Africans, and we went down to South Africa. We did a job down there for them. Fairly exciting. And then we came back to Rhodesia, and not long after that, Rhodesia went down, you know, as we knew it, and then became Zimbabwe.
Were there any close calls in the South Africa border war?
Yes.
Could you tell us about one?
The Pathfinders, we went up to South West Africa to a place called Ndangwa, and they attached us to one parachute battalion to, you know, as observers and to pick up the way they did things. And the next thing we knew, there was terrorists at a place called Komato, which is just over the Angolan border. So we flew in helicopters, and as we were flying in, guys opened up the chopper just as we were landing. And luckily I saw one. He was loading an RPG-7 rocket into the tube. And lucky enough, I nailed him. And the rest of them, we just bowled straight after them and arrested them. We spent that day scrapping about with them, and all of a sudden we hit another section of the camp. And this officer said to me, "Peter, do you think you can break in there?" So there was 8 Pathfinders with me. So I called them in, and it was something we'd been rehearsing day in and day out for about 7 months, was breaching a camp. And I said, "Get me the Pathfinders." And I just looked into the bushes and I went, "God help me in this one." Yeah, the old Catholic came out, you know. And the Pathfinders came, and I briefed them. I said, "Right, guys, we'll practice this for months. Let's go and earn our pay." And I was proud of them. Every one of them bowled straight at that camp. We broke into the first layer of trenches, and I threw a grenade and a white phosphorus into a bunker. And I thought, that's it. And all of a sudden, this guy emerged. He must have been about 6'2", came running towards me, and I went to shoot him. I had a double feed on my rifle, and he was a lot bigger than me. So I finished up sort of hitting him with the rifle as much as I could to keep him away from me, you know. And he was highly motivated because he was in fire, you know.
Yeah.
And he came at me, and lucky enough, I got him back, and one of the guys shot him. And then the next day, we pulled out, and they really ran riot. We didn't realise it wasn't one camp, it was 3 mutually supporting each other. So we pulled out, and the next morning, the Pathfinders get called up again. And it was, by this time, the South Africans were really hammering it with K cars, that's cannon cars, you know, with 50 caliber machine guns. And they were really rattling the place for about an hour. And then we attacked it for a second time. And I was in a start line leading a group of men. And I went, "Okay, guys, forward," you know, and I ran forward. And all of a sudden, I realised there was no one with me. So I felt pretty exposed in the middle of this camp because I was attracting a wee bit of fire, you know, enemy fire. And I seen a hole in the ground. I'm sure God put it there. I jumped into this hole, and my antenna from my radio was sticking up, and I could hear all the bullets pinging by and hit the edge of it. But lucky enough, the K car took the guys out, and then I could carry on with what I was doing. It was a very hairy 2 days, you know. But like everything else, if you defeat the enemy, you feel you've achieved something. But the guys we ran into were SWAPO, and they weren't afraid to fight.
It's the importance, I guess, of having a good team around you, and that camaraderie and the training, and I guess, the preparation. You know, if you don't prepare, then you're prepared to fail.
That's it. That's it. Prior proper planning prevents poor performance.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And that is the same in any walk of life, but especially when your life's on the line, Peter.
Yeah.
And other people's. Okay, the South Africa journey also involved, I guess, becoming an employee of a security group. You also had a near-death parachuting incident. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what happened is I joined a security company, and it was sort of paramilitary. And what they wanted to do was they were having an open day, and they wanted us to parachute in to give it that, look what we've got on our hands, So I was still in the reserves, and I parachuted on the Wednesday at a place called Waterkloof. Space Cop. And I had a good jump there. And so we went on Saturday morning to do another practice jump. And it just didn't seem right. As we were going out to the aircraft, I was jumping with civilians, so we're just getting my hand back in again for this jump, but for the company I was working for. And my parachute popped on the way to the aircraft, so I just lay down, and the guys repacked the parachute on my back and put the pins back in. It's no great thing, it's just the pins popped. Then we went up and we jumped, and we were trying to form a star. And we came in, we got together, and then we broke. And I looked, and we were under 2,000 feet, and I said, I better get, a better pull. And I looked above me, and there was a guy just above me. I says, I'm going to hit him with my bag if I pull now. So I dropped another, I don't know how far it was. I just popped my chute. And I heard a bonging sound coming off the rigging lines, bong, bong, bong. And I looked up, and it just looked like a brazier, I was all over the place. I couldn't control it. And, and as I came near the ground, I realised, I said, this is going to be serious. And there's little things you always remember, One, I just said, God, get me out of this one. And I just remember the old parachute saying, head well forward, shoulders round, feet together, watch the ground. So I followed it in, and I broke both my legs. One was hanging off. It was an exciting jump, but I didn't like the outcome,
But you survived.
I went to hospital, and I met a doctor who later I grew very friendly with him, and what he said, he took me into the theatre. He says, if you come out with your right leg on, it's a bonus. And I came out, and I looked, and it was an open cast plaster. You could still see the wound. And I said to the doctor, he says, I said, you're thinking cutting my leg off? He says, yes. And so he just left it with me. And then a Pathfinder who'd lost both his legs came to see me. And he was standing at the end of the bed. And he had a very strong American type voice. He said, Sergeant Major, I know you're a religious man. And it says in the good book, if I offend you, cut it off. He says, look at me now, he's got no legs. He says, it hasn't harmed me any. Then he hobbles off like Douglas Bader, And it made me realise, the doctor then came back to me. He said, Peter, I think I can save your leg.
Let's look at the Colombian Cali cartel. And obviously on the display behind me, there's quite a famous face, and that's you. And then next to you is a guy called Pablo Escobar. And tell me how this came about. I've watched the documentary, which is on which has just been on recently, called Killing Escobar, a UK documentary released this year. Fascinating insight again into another great story in your life. But how did this one come about?
I've got a friend called Dave Tompkins who I met in Angola. And Dave had been wounded. I'd gone to see him in hospital in Angola, and we struck up a friendship. And we always kept contact over the years, what we were doing. I went to Rhodesia. I then met Dave out there. He was just passing through, and we kept contact. And then I was up in Hereford, and Dave came into the pub. He said, "Can I have a chat with you?" And he said, "I've got a bit of a prospect here. I want to know if you're interested." And he told me what it was, and I said, "Okay, let's go for it." The adventure of the whole thing,
So what was the job that you had to do? Because there'll be a lot of people who won't have managed to see the documentary as yet. But Pablo Escobar was obviously controlling the Cali cartel in Colombia, the biggest drugs operation ever, if you look into the story. Yeah. What was your job that you were asked to do?
I was asked to kill Pablo Escobar. There's Dave and I sat at the table, and they said, "Can you kill Pablo Escobar?" We just said yes. But, we're going to need certain things to do it. And they said, "Okay, tell me what you want and we'll get it for you." And they did.
I found the dramatizations great, and a good friend of mine, I'm an actor by trade, a good friend of mine, Paul Donnelly, was actually playing yourself in the actual dramatization. I found it fascinating just to see you guys having to go through this whole process, and you were literally sitting down across a table from these other people, and it was like a scene from The Godfather, Peter.
Yeah.
What was it like being in that situation for you?
As it started off, we were all a group of men from all over the world, but we all knew each other. Every one of them had been in action. And then we had when we started getting together and training, you could see it gelling as it went along. And, but we couldn't do anything because we were too much because we were situated in a town. So what we were doing was map exercises. What happens if this happens? What happens? So action on so and so. So what we did then was they moved us in. We got them to move us into the jungle where we could do some live training, and that's where it really gelled. And you could see the team coming together, and I felt a sense of pride in that. There was guys from Britain, guys from Australia, guys from Scotland, a couple of jocks there. And when I saw it coming together, I said, "This is fantastic." You get a feeling of well-being. You get a feeling that you're going to do a job, and you say to yourself, I think I've given these guys the best deal I can give them. Can you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
We've trained. There's not a great deal more we can do, but every day we went out there and we just, even if we only walked through it, we changed positions. We'd put another guy in charge in case somebody gets shot. It just went on for 11 weeks. And I mean, I've been in the army and we never had that long to train for any job.
You kept the subject matter quiet from the rest of the guys. Why was that?
Because my experience with guys is, if you tell them what they're doing, you'll get one guy will head off straight. It's fairly common. They head off straight to the newspapers and sell their story. So we kept it fairly tight, and we never actually told them till we'd committed ourselves to the target.
You did have one
Um,
of the guys. You did have one of the guys leave the team. He just wasn't up for the job.
he came to me and he said, my bottle is gone. And it put me in an awkward position. What I said to myself was, if I keep him hanging around here, he could lower the morale of the rest of the men, and he's got to justify why his bottle is gone. If I let him go, well, I don't know what he's going to do. But the men were all very aware of it, and I went in and I concocted a story to the men. And I said, look, the guy's got problems at home and whatnot, and I'm letting him go. And one of the guys just said, he's fucking gutless. And they were right. You know, it's all right saying keep him hanging around, but kept him hanging around there. You just don't know what's going to happen, because you could infect the morale of the rest of the group. So as soon as you get back to the UK, straight in and sold his story. As I told you, it's fairly common. It's not nothing new. It was a shame because he was a very funny man. He was good for morale, always cracking jokes. But when it came to closing with the enemy and killing them, I don't think he was too fond of it, you know.
Talk us through the operation, and Peter. How did it pan out?
The actual operation itself, or the preparation for the operation?
Well, both. Let's start with the preparation.
The preparation, we did 11 weeks training. Once we get into the jungle, we had weapons, everything, all the weapons, all the stuff, all the ammunition that we were going to use in that job. Every piece of kit that we needed to attack those premises was with us. So it was just a case of getting in the choppers and going. But we had to get Escobar in place. So they had a spy working in Escobar's ranch, and he would give the message when Escobar was present. So we trained, and it was then they brought the helicopters up. We painted the helicopters, and it was just a case of let's see how it goes. But every morning we'd just go out and do a quick warm up, a quick walkthrough of what we were going to do, look at all the kit, have a quick talk in what we were doing, and carry on from there. And then the message came through, he's in position. And honestly, there was not a man there that wasn't up for it. Can you see it?
Yeah.
We'd prepared. They felt confident, and we all got in the helicopters, and we flew off towards the target. And I remember sitting in the helicopter, and I said to myself, did I give these men the best deal I could give them, training-wise and preparation-wise? And I was fairly happy about it. At this time, I was flying over a place called McAleese, and we started to turn right to go over the top of the mountains. And then some cloud came down, and I noticed the pilot of the other helicopter, who was a fairly experienced older pilot, and he took the helicopter right up. I just seen him rising all the time. And we had a younger pilot, and he was trying to go through the clouds. And next thing I knew, I turned around to the guys. I've loosened my seatbelt. I says, this doesn't look like right. I turned around to the guys in the back. I says, get in the crash position. As I'd done that and turned round, the helicopter hit the trees. The blade came through one of the blades came through the cab and hit the pilot. The helicopter then turned upside down, went through the trees, cutting them down and siding them down, and it bored a hole in the ground about maybe 10 feet. And I got out there. I didn't realise that I was hurt because I was too busy looking at the pilot, and he'd turned sort of bluish colour. And Dave came down, and we started working on him. We tried to get a drip into him, and we were struggling. And I said, all we can do is, this guy's going to die, so let's make it easier for him. So we pumped some morphine into him, just to make his dying less painful. And and then he passed away. But this time we were in a hole about, as I told you, we were in a hole about 10 feet deep. Dave and the guys pulled me out the hole, and I suddenly realised that I was in a bad way, and I collapsed. And I didn't realise I'd broken ribs, and all my old parachute injuries were really bad. And they pulled me onto a ledge, and I said to them, right, go away and try and get some help. Now the support helicopter had come back over, and he was flying over the top of us, but he couldn't get into us because we were on the side of a steep mountain. And I just lay there and I said to them, go and get help. And without realising it, I'd broken one of the rules. Someone should have stayed with me. But before they went, they realised I was in a bad way, and they packed me full of bandages and whatnot out the medical pack, shoved it down my jacket to try and keep me warm. And they took off looking for help.
So what happened then, Peter?
I lay up there for 3 days.
Wow.
And I'd lost my watch in the crash. I started feeling hungry, so I crawled to the area of the chopper, and I went in. I got my escape pack, had some biscuits in there, a couple of tins. I found a tin of beans, and I lay there and I said, "Well, I've got to try and sustain myself." So I opened a tin of beans. I cooked a tin of beans and ate them, and I just lay there, and it was raining all the time. I was soaking all the way through, and it was an experience. It'd be wrong to say I enjoyed it, but it gave me time to do a bit of soul searching. And you know, the old Catholic thing, you know, as I said to God, I tried to make a deal with God. I said, listen, if you get me out of this one, I promise I'll try and be a good boy, you know, words to that effect. And so I lay there, and the chopper kept flying over the next day. And it was to let me know that they were trying. It was their way of telling me that they still had me in mind.
Yeah.
And then I could hear some Spanish voices. And I went, oh no, this could be Pablo's boys. And you know, those guys are not going to give you a good death. So I had an interdynamic submachine gun. And I just put a couple of magazines at the side. I took a grenade, I pulled the pin out. And it was nothing to do with being big time. It was to do with, I'm not letting these guys get a hold of me because it's going to be pain. So they came closer and closer and closer, and the pin was out the grenade, and I had that in one hand and the interdynamic in another. And the guy came right onto me, and I shoved the machine gun in his stomach because I didn't know who he was. And he went, amigo, amigo, Ricardo, Ricardo. And that was one of the guys who was with her. That was his code name. So I realised that help had come, and we chatted away. And I said, how far away are we from where we can get help? He said 8 hours. Okay, so they chopped a tree down, and they tied me to the tree. You know, they never tied me tightly too loosely. They put the tree down the re-entrance and slid me down the tree. They cleaned it all off, and it was just like a telegraph pole. By the time they were finished, they drew sharp pangas with them, and they were lowering me down. The fucking pain was excruciating. And they had me on the end of this rope, you know, and I'm trying to give it the manhood thing, you know. And it was very, very painful. So we got down. We spent the best part of the day getting down to the bottom, and it was starting to get dark. So we went into a little area, a little dent in the ground, and it was raining that heavy. The dent started filling up with water, and we'd nowhere to go. So we had to lay in the water for the night. Sort of half of us out of the water and the other half in. And it was funny because they'd got a hold of my escape pack, and I could hear them there, and I had escape money with me. They were cutting the money out, you know, sharing the money out among themselves. And I felt, well, I can't really complain because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be alive. So the next day, we started off again. I says, how long? They said 4 hours. 4 hours was up. I says, how long? They said 4 hours. And eventually, I seen a hose pipe. And I said, well, we must be near civilization. Now, this hose pipe was about 1,000 meters long. And it was their way of getting running water. Can you see it? They were off to the one side of the stream and they went to the high part. They were down and they used it like a tap and just put a plug in it. Anyway, we went up to this house, well, a basher, and they put me on a bed there, and the bed was made out of sacking, you know, and honestly, it was like paradise. And this woman brought me in a cup of coffee, and it was like somebody buying a bottle of Nescafe and putting a drop of water in it, you know. It was that thick. And they said the helicopter's coming. So I'm waiting for the helicopter to come in and pick me up next to the basher where I was. I says, where is it? They says, it's going to land in that hill over there. So I had to climb another hill.
Yeah.
It was a steady walk upwards, but the last part of the hill was steep. And it was about 200 feet. So I finally get to the top, to the landing pad. The helicopter came in and blew me over. I rolled down the hill again. And lucky enough, I was so shattered. I never tried to resist. I just let myself roll, you know.
Yeah.
And they eventually got me into the chopper, got me into hospital. The doctors got onto me and they said they did what they could for me. And they thought the baddies were going to come and raid the hospital. So they shipped me out on a helicopter and took me down to Cali. And the guys were extremely kind to me. I lay in bed there for the best part of a week. And, you know, they'd bring me meals and whatnot. And I started to recover, but I was still in a bad way, you know. And I've still got the injuries to this day, because what actually happened when I crashed, I aggravated all the old parachute injuries I had. But it was, to be honest, it was exciting. You know, it wasn't that way at the time, because all I was trying to do was exist, to survive. But once I actually got back to civilization and back in among the men, I knew I was going to be okay.
Amazing story, that. And you know, the documentary was superb, but it's the kind of thing you'd love to see as a film. So you never know, budding filmmakers out there might turn it into a film.
Can I put something on your screen?
Yeah.
Oh, this is my book.
Brilliant.
There we are. The whole story's in there, and you can also get me on Facebook and petermcaleese.sas.com. So
fantastic. The books that you brought out have been well received as well. I mean, let's finish off on the books, Peter. I mean, you know, the one which has been the biggest success and biggest seller is Beyond No Mean Soldier, but there's also a fighting manual out there and No Mean Soldiers. I mean, look, from your perspective, what was it like to sit and write those stories and put your life into book form?
To me, it was exciting because I've always loved soldiering, and lucky enough, the guy who was working with me on the book, you know, an ex-SAS officer, we had some fantastic time. You know, I used to drink at the time, and one night we were really laying into the wine, and you know, and it was funny how you could get things out. You know, I talked about meeting a reporter in Panama and how he looked like Crockett out of Miami Vice, you know. And I said he came along, and it was funny. And he had this glass, and he'd say something like, "Did it have an umbrella in it?" You know, and he'd goad me along, and we had some fantastic fun writing it. It was good fun. But the other thing was, it made me think about soldiering. because that's something I've always loved.
Is there anything you would change in your life, Peter?
Soldiering wise, I think maybe when I was younger, not to be as punchy, and it was a character defect with me. The other side is my personal life. I wish I could have been a better husband and father. It wasn't that it was bad. I feel I never made a great enough effort.
We talked at the start of the program just about national service. Is that something, when you see what the youngsters are like these days, is that something you think we could return to, or should be brought in? Because I often feel that we're lacking a lot of manners now. We're lacking a lot of basic skills, and there's too much time on screens and computers, etc. And do you think a bit of basic training and a bit of national service would do the youngsters good? Maybe give them a new trade?
It'd be hard to bring back again. I think the problem was they stopped it. And they stopped it because they thought they were going to build a big regular army. And they never got the response that they thought, because there was a boom going on in the country. Everybody was working. There was plenty of money flying about. And then what they did is, my brother actually got caught. He was a national serviceman. He got caught for 6 months extra. And then he'd got himself locked up in the earlier days of his national service. So as someone who went in to do 2 years, he finished up doing 6 months, and then 3 months for the time they'd been locked up. And he didn't take it too greatly. But after the event, he says, Peter, it's only now that I realise it was fantastic, because we made mates there that we'd never forgotten about. I think it's a good thing. Yeah,
I do as well. Yeah, obviously I do. I'm past the age now, so I'm not affected by it. I don't think I could. Last question I'll ask you is, if there's any youngster out there watching now who is contemplating the thought of, joining the British Army, joining the parachute regiment, getting into the SAS, what advice would you give them, Peter?
Make sure you know what you're doing first. And make sure that you're making. A lot of kids go in there and they think you just walk in there, they give you a red beret, and the next thing you're home and leave looking menacing. It doesn't work like that. You've got to earn that. I'll tell you a wee quick story before we go off. When I joined the parachute regiment, I had a corporal came and took me under his wing. This is how you lay out your locker. This is how you do that. Now get your boots at the bottom there. That's it, your plimsolls either side. Very, very helpful to me. And I wrote to my mother, don't forget, I'm only 17. I said, the corporal's my best pal. So the corporal came in and told us that we were starting training on Monday morning. And this lovely corporal on Monday morning opened the door and threw a dustbin down the middle of the basher and started terrorising us. And that went on for 10 weeks. I didn't. And you got to the stage where you did things instinctively, I was in a constant state of turmoil, Yeah.
Great. So Peter,
I'd advise it for any young man,
Yeah, it's a great career. It's for special, dedicated people. You have to be dedicated. As you said, you need to know what you're doing. And like I said at the start of the program, thanks for everything you've done. Thanks for everybody who takes up that kind of job and protects us, because we should never forget those that we've lost as well, Peter.
I thank you.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
And thank everybody for watching and listening.